July 4, 1943, Bougainville Island, Solomon Sea. Humidity hung heavy in the air as Commander Hiroshi Watanabe peered through his binoculars at the American positions across the ridge. Static crackled from the radio set behind him, where his cryptanalysts worked feverishly to decode the latest American transmissions. "These codes are unbreakable," Watanabe declared to his intelligence officers, and confidence masking his growing desperation. Little did he know that thousands of miles away in Navajo lands, the very foundation of Japanese military intelligence was being systematically dismantled by a force they could never have anticipated. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the account of how America's most classified weapon of World War II wasn't a bomb or a plane, but a language, and how the collision between ancient cultural heritage and modern warfare would transform not just the Pacific battlefield, but the men on both sides who found themselves caught in this invisible crossfire. Lieutenant Colonel James Jones of the United States Marine Corps Signal Intelligence Section leaned back in his chair, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. 3 years into the Pacific campaign, and the intelligence war was reaching a critical juncture. The Americans had cracked the Japanese JN-25 naval code in 1942, providing crucial advantages at Midway and beyond. The Japanese, aware of security breaches but unaware of their extent, had been frantically changing their encryption systems. "They've modified their code again, sir," said Captain William Reynolds, dropping a folder on Jones' desk. "6th revision in 3 months. Our boys at Station Hypo say they're implementing additional transposition ciphers with multiple substitution alphabets." Jones flipped through the intelligence report. "And what's our timeline for breaking it?" "Optimistically, 3 weeks. Realistically, could be a month or more." Reynolds hesitated. By then, the Marianas operation could be underway," Jones finished. "Thousands of men heading into combat without proper intelligence." He glanced at the calendar. July 1943. The war in the Pacific was turning, but slowly, bloodily. Reynolds shifted his weight. "There's something else, sir. We've received word from the front. The Navajo program is exceeding all expectations." Jones felt a rare smile form. "Philip Johnston's idea? The Navajo speakers?" "Yes, sir. The initial field tests on Guadalcanal were successful beyond anything we projected. 29 Navajo Marines transmitting and receiving tactical messages in their native language, supplemented by the specialized military vocabulary they developed during training. Messages that took our conventional encryption machines 30 minutes to encode, transmit and decode were being processed in 20 seconds. Jones leaned forward. "And Japanese intelligence. That's the remarkable part, sir. 0 interceptions, not a single message compromised. They're calling them code talkers now." On the other side of the world, Sergeant Henry Yazzie of the 3rd Marine Division pressed his body against the mud of Bougainville as Japanese mortars exploded around his position. 24 years old, he had grown up herding sheep on the Navajo reservation in Arizona, speaking a language that less than 30 non-Navajo people in the world understood. Now that language was the difference between life and death for thousands of Marines. "Alpha Company pinned down, grid coordinates Baker 6 Charlie," Corporal Thomas Begay shouted over the explosions, his voice hoarse from the volcanic dust that coated everything on the island. "Request immediate fire support." Yazzie nodded, pulling the radio handset close to his mud-streaked face. Unlike other radio operators who needed codebooks and encryption devices, Yazzie carried the code in his head, in the language he had been forbidden to speak in the government boarding schools he'd attended as a child. "D-Bay," he began in Navajo, the word for sheep that represented the letter B. "Wolachi, Guinea, Lin." The transmission continued, lightning-fast words that translated the coordinates and request into a code within a code. Navajo words representing English letters, supplemented by specialized vocabulary where iron fish meant submarine and potato meant hand grenade. 10 miles away, Private First Class Paul Manuelito received the transmission, translating instantly back into English. Within moments, artillery support rained down on the Japanese positions, allowing Alpha Company to advance. Total time from request to action, less than a minute. The same communication using conventional encryption would have taken half an hour. Potentially the difference between victory and defeat, life and death. In his headquarters bunker, Commander Watanabe slammed his fist on the table as his cryptanalysis team delivered their report. "What do you mean, untranslatable? Everything can be translated." Major Toshiro Yamamoto, head of signals intelligence for the Imperial Japanese Army's 17th Division, maintained his composure despite his commander's outburst. "Sir, we have intercepted 168 American transmissions over the past week using this new communication method. Our analysis indicates it's not a traditional code or cipher. It appears to be an actual language, but unlike anything in our linguistic database." Watanabe's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Your team includes graduates from the Imperial University with expertise in English, German, Russian, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Dutch, and Chinese dialects, sir, plus Malay, Thai, and Filipino languages," Yamamoto finished. "None match. We've consulted with Professor Nishida, who specialized in Native American anthropology before the war. He suggests it may be an indigenous American language, but cannot specify which one." How many such languages exist? According to the professor, potentially hundreds, many with no written form and extremely limited speakers. Some are completely unrelated to any European or Asian language family. Watanabe stared at the intercepted transmission logs. American forces were moving with unprecedented coordination, responding to Japanese deployments almost instantly. The strategic advantage offered by these unbreakable communications was becoming painfully clear with each passing day. "Find someone who speaks these languages," Watanabe ordered. "There must be records, dictionaries, someone who studied them." Yamamoto hesitated. "Sir, many of these languages were documented only by American anthropologists. With the war, then capture one of their radio operators," Watanabe snapped. "I want this code broken. The Emperor's forces cannot be defeated by tribal gibberish." Meanwhile, at Camp Pendleton, California, a new group of Navajo recruits was undergoing specialized training. Marine Corps instructors watched as 20 young men from the reservation practiced encoding and decoding messages using the system their predecessors had developed. Master Sergeant Walter Mitchell paced before the group. "Gentlemen, what you're learning here is quite possibly the most important weapon in the Pacific Theater. The Japanese have approximately 200 of their best cryptanalysts working to break American codes. So far, they've had considerable success against our conventional systems." Mitchell pointed to a chart showing statistics. "Their signals intelligence units have broken Army and Navy codes with a 75% success rate within 24 hours of implementation. Their linguistic expertise is formidable. Tokyo Radio often broadcasts accurate details of upcoming American operations before they even begin." The recruits listened intently, aware of how their unique skills had suddenly transformed from a liability in American society to a precious military asset. "By contrast," Mitchell continued, "the Navajo Code has been deployed in 3 major operations to date, with over 800 transmissions. Number of messages intercepted and decoded by Japanese intelligence, 0. He let that sink in. "Your language, gentlemen, combined with the specialized military vocabulary you'll memorize, is the only secure communication system in the entire Pacific Theater." Private Wilson Nez raised his hand. "Sir, what exactly makes Navajo so difficult for the Japanese to understand?" Mitchell nodded. "Excellent question. Professor Johnston, if you would." Philip Johnston, the civilian architect of the Navajo Code Talker program, stepped forward. Son of a missionary who had worked on the Navajo reservation, Johnston was one of the few non-Navajo who spoke the language fluently. The Navajo language possesses several characteristics that make it ideal for this purpose, Johnston explained. First, it's an unwritten language with extremely complex grammar and syntax, unlike any European or Asian language. It uses tones that change meaning, similar to Chinese but with different patterns. It contains sounds that don't exist in Japanese, German, or even English. He pointed to linguistic charts. Navajo has 4 distinct tones, more than 30 consonants, and a grammar so complex that linguistic experts spent decades trying to document it. Most importantly, it was completely isolated from outside influence until relatively recently. There are no dictionaries or learning materials available to the enemy. Back on Bougainville, Sergeant Yazzie and Corporal Begay had joined a forward patrol led by Lieutenant Michael Carter, pushing through dense jungle towards suspected Japanese artillery positions. The patrol included 12 Marines, including one other Navajo Code Talker, Private Jesse Wilson. "Command wants real-time updates on Japanese deployments," Carter explained as they moved cautiously through the underbrush. "Intelligence suggests they're repositioning their 75mm mountain guns to target our landing beaches." Begay nodded, adjusting the heavy radio on his back. "We'll keep the line open, sir." The patrol had moved approximately 2 miles inland when Wilson, on point, suddenly raised his fist, the signal to halt. Through a break in the foliage, they could see a Japanese encampment. Approximately 30 soldiers, 3 artillery pieces carefully camouflaged with palm fronds and jungle vegetation. Carter whispered to Yazzie, "We need to report exact coordinates, gun calibers, troop numbers." Yazzie nodded, taking the handset from Begay. He began speaking in rapid Navajo, his voice barely above a whisper. "Moasi, Altai, Tekele Chog, Ne Asja." Unri, the precision of modern warfare translated through words that had been used for centuries to describe the mesas and wildlife of the American Southwest. At that moment, approximately 200 yards away, a Japanese signals intelligence team was sweeping the radio frequencies, hunting for American transmissions. Sergeant Kenji Tanaka froze as his headphones picked up Yazzie's voice. "Contact!" he said sharply to his commander, Lieutenant Hideo Nakamura. "American transmission, very close." Nakamura grabbed his own headphones, listening intently. His eyes narrowed in frustration as the unfamiliar sounds washed over him. "It's them again, the ghost voices." "Sir, that's what the men call them. The American operators who speak the language none of our experts can identify." Nakamura checked his watch, making notation of the time and frequency. "Direction!" Tanaka adjusted the direction-finding equipment. "Northwest, less than half a kilometer." Nakamura's eyes gleamed. "They're close. Perhaps today we capture one of these ghost voice operators and solve this mystery once and for all." He grabbed his field telephone, calling for a rapid response team to converge on the transmission source. Yazzie finished his transmission and was just receiving confirmation when Wilson slid back to their position. "Movement in the jungle," he whispered. "Heading this way, fast." Lieutenant Carter assessed the situation quickly. "They've detected the radio transmission. Yazzie, send one final message. Our position and that we're being pursued. Then everyone fall back to Rally Point Delta." As Yazzie began the transmission, the first shots cracked through the jungle. The Japanese patrol had arrived sooner than expected, moving with precision that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for. "Go, go!" Carter ordered as the Marines returned fire, creating a covering screen as they began their withdrawal. Begay helped Yazzie disconnect the radio, securing it to his back as they moved. The firefight intensified as more Japanese soldiers converged on their position. Private Wilson took a bullet to the shoulder but kept moving, assisted by another Marine. They had nearly reached the densest part of the jungle when Lieutenant Nakamura's voice rang out in heavily accented English. "American radio operators, surrender and you will be treated according to international law." Carter gestured for his men to keep moving as he and two other Marines provided covering fire. Yazzie and Begay exchanged glances. Both knew what would happen if they were captured with their knowledge of the code. "Not gonna happen," Begay muttered, drawing his sidearm as they crashed through the undergrowth. The Marines split into three groups, using prearranged evasion patterns to confuse their pursuers. Yazzie and Begay, along with Carter and one other Marine, headed toward a stream they had crossed earlier, hoping to use it to throw off any tracking. "They really want you to," Carter observed as they paused to catch their breath. The sounds of pursuit momentarily faded. "I've never seen them so determined to capture rather than kill." Yazzie nodded grimly. "They want the code. They must have finally realized it's not just another encryption system." Behind them, Lieutenant Nakamura was interrogating a wounded Marine captured during the firefight. "The radio operators, what language do they speak?" Nakamura demanded, his face inches from the bleeding American. Private First Class Robert Miller, a 20-year-old from Nebraska, stared back defiantly. "Name, rank, and serial number. That's all you get." Nakamura straightened, adjusting his uniform. "We know they are using a Native American language. Tell us which tribe, and your treatment will improve significantly." Miller remained silent, impressed despite his pain that the Japanese had gotten this close to the truth. Nakamura turned to Sergeant Tanaka. "Continue tracking the radio team. I want those operators alive." As dusk fell, Yazzie's group had successfully evaded their pursuers and rendezvoused with other survivors at Rally Point Delta. 8 of the original 12 had made it. The fate of the others remained unknown. "We need to get back to our lines before dawn," Carter decided. "They'll be hunting us with everything they have." Begay checked the radio equipment, which had been damaged during their escape. "I can get it working enough for one transmission," he told Yazzie, "but it'll give away our position again." Carter considered their options. Send the coordinates of their artillery position first. That was our mission. Then let command know our situation. As Yazzie prepared to transmit, he paused, an idea forming. "Sir, I'd like to add something to the message." Carter nodded. "Go ahead." Yazzie began transmitting in Navajo, providing the artillery coordinates with perfect precision. Then he added a detailed report of their situation, including the fact that the Japanese were specifically targeting code talkers for capture. Finally, he included a request that would alter the course of the code talker program. Back at Marine headquarters, Major General Alexander Vandergrift listened as the intelligence officer translated Yazzie's message. "They're specifically requesting permission to modify certain code words, sir," the officer explained. "They believe the Japanese may be getting close to identifying the language, if not decoding it. Sergeant Yazzie suggests implementing regional dialect variations that even some Navajo wouldn't recognize." Vandergrift considered this. "These code talkers have earned my trust. Permission granted. Have our linguists work with the Navajo instructors at Camp Pendleton to implement the changes immediately." Within days, new instructions were being distributed to all code talker teams throughout the Pacific Theater. The already complex system was being made even more impenetrable. Meanwhile, Commander Watanabe had received Lieutenant Nakamura's report with growing frustration. "So close, yet they escaped," he muttered, studying the map of Bougainville. "Sir," Nakamura said carefully, "we did capture one Marine, but he provided no useful information despite extensive questioning. Watanabe waved this away. What about Professor Nishida's analysis of the recorded transmissions? Major Yamamoto stepped forward. Professor Nishida has confirmed with 90% certainty that the language is Navajo, from the southwestern United States. However, even with this knowledge, we face nearly insurmountable obstacles to creating a usable dictionary or translation system. Explain, Watanabe demanded. The Navajo reservation covers 27,000 square miles with a population of approximately 50,000. Their language has no written form accessible outside specialized academic circles. The few anthropological studies conducted were primarily by American researchers. Yamamoto hesitated before continuing. Even if we identified a Japanese scholar with knowledge of the language, which is highly unlikely, the Americans appear to be using some form of specialized military vocabulary layered on top of the base language. Watanabe paced the room, hands clasped behind his back. What about Navajo, who might cooperate with us? Surely not all Native Americans are loyal to the United States, given their historical treatment. We've explored that avenue, sir. There are no Navajo in Japan, and access to the American mainland is, of course, impossible at this stage of the war. Watanabe stopped abruptly. What about their population statistics? Sir, you said 50,000 Navajo. What percentage speak the language fluently? Yamamoto consulted his notes. According to pre-war anthropological surveys, approximately 90% speak Navajo as their primary language. And how many would have the education and military training necessary to serve as these? Code talkers? Based on American military requirements, perhaps 5% of military-age men. So approximately 500 to 600 potential candidates. Watanabe did the calculations quickly. So the Americans have deployed a code system that requires specific individuals from a tiny population, speaking a language with no available learning materials, supplemented by specialized terminology developed specifically for military purposes. He shook his head slowly. A brilliant strategy, I must admit. In the months that followed, the Navajo Code Talker program expanded dramatically. From the original 29 recruits, the program grew to over 400 Navajo Marines by 1945, serving in every major Pacific campaign from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. Their communications remained utterly impenetrable to Japanese intelligence throughout the war. Sergeant Yazzie found himself promoted to Staff Sergeant and assigned to train new code talkers arriving in the Pacific. As he briefed a group of recent graduates from Camp Pendleton on Guam in early 1945, he emphasized the psychological impact their work was having. The Japanese signals intelligence units have essentially given up trying to decode our transmissions, he explained to the fresh-faced Navajo Marines. We've intercepted their communications, discussing the ghost voices. That's us, and the frustration is evident. They're cryptanalysts, some of the best in the world who successfully broke nearly every other Allied code, have been completely defeated by the language our ancestors gave us. Private Jim Sosi, one of the new arrivals, raised his hand. How many lives do they estimate we've saved? Yazzie nodded appreciatively at the question. Military intelligence credits the Navajo Code with saving countless lives, particularly during the landings at Iwo Jima. Over 800 transmissions were processed in the first 2 days alone, all without error. The Japanese were completely blindsided by our tactical movements because they had no advance warning. He pointed to a map showing American advances across the Pacific. The Japanese were able to intercept and decode up to 75% of conventional American military codes during the early war years. Their signals intelligence gave them tremendous advantages at places like Bataan and Corregidor. But from the moment the Navajo Code was implemented, that advantage disappeared completely. As the war in the Pacific entered its final stages, Commander Watanabe found himself transferred to the Japanese homeland defense preparations. During a high-level strategy meeting in Tokyo, he was surprised to be called upon specifically regarding the Navajo Code issue. "Commander Watanabe," said General Hideki Tojo, former Prime Minister and now coordinating Homeland Defense, "your reports on the American native language encryption system have been studied with great interest. What is your assessment of our ability to counter this system in the defense of the home islands?" Watanabe stood, acutely aware that his answer reflected on years of failure by Japanese intelligence. "Sir, I regretfully report that after nearly 2 years of concentrated effort by our best cryptanalysts and linguists, we have made virtually no progress in breaking the Navajo Code. The Americans have deployed approximately 400 Navajo code talkers throughout the Pacific, and their system has proven to be the only military communication method completely impervious to our interception efforts." A murmur went through the assembled officers. Tojo's expression remained impassive. "Your recommendation, Commander?" Watanabe straightened. "We must assume that any American offensive against the home islands will utilize these code talkers for primary tactical communications. Our only effective countermeasure would be to eliminate their radio operators through concentrated sniper fire or artillery targeting of communication centers. We cannot defeat what we cannot understand." The admission of defeat was bitter, but Watanabe had come to respect the ingenious simplicity of the American solution. A language with no connection to any Asian or European tongue, spoken by a small indigenous population from a remote region, had defeated the entire Japanese cryptanalytic apparatus. August 1945 brought the war to its apocalyptic conclusion, not through the anticipated invasion of Japan, but through the devastating new power of atomic weapons. As American occupation forces arrived in Japan, Sergeant Henry Yazzie found himself in an unexpected position, part of a signals intelligence team interrogating Japanese cryptanalysts about their wartime operations. At a signals intelligence facility outside Yokohama, Yazzie sat across from Major Toshiro Yamamoto, formerly of the Imperial Japanese Army's 17th Division. An interpreter facilitated their conversation, though Yamamoto spoke reasonable English. "You are Navajo," Yamamoto stated, studying Yazzie with evident curiosity. "One of the ghost voices," Yazzie nodded. "That's what you called us? Your transmissions haunted our intelligence units. Voices speaking words we could not begin to comprehend, directing attacks that seemed to anticipate our every move." Yamamoto managed a small, dignified smile. "In all my years in signals intelligence, never have I encountered a more perfect encryption system." "It wasn't encryption," Yazzie corrected. "That was the beauty of it. We were just speaking our language. With modifications for military terminology, yes? Our analysis suggested as much." "That part was actually fun to create," Yazzie admitted. "We had no Navajo word for submarine, so we called it Ironfish. A bomber became pregnant airplane. A fighter plane was hummingbird." Yamamoto shook his head in wonderment. "So simple, yet completely effective, while we devoted thousands of man-hours and our most brilliant minds to breaking mathematical encryption systems. You defeated us with words passed down through generations. Words the American government tried to beat out of us in their boarding schools," Yazzie added with a touch of irony. "They punished us for speaking Navajo, tried to make us forget our language. Then they discovered they needed it to win their war." Understanding passed between the two men, former enemies, recognizing the strange twists of history and culture that had brought them to this moment. "Your code talkers changed the course of the Pacific War," Yamamoto acknowledged. "Without secure communications, American forces would have suffered much greater casualties, perhaps even defeat in certain engagements." Yazzie had not expected such frank admission from a Japanese officer. "Thank you for saying that. Many of our contributions have gone unrecognized." Because of the secrecy? The Code Talker program remained classified. When we returned home, we couldn't tell anyone what we had done during the war. Yamamoto looked genuinely surprised. But surely now, with the war over, we were sworn to secrecy, Yazzie said simply. The Marine Corps believes the code might be needed in future conflicts. Indeed, the Navajo Code Talker program remained classified until 1968, long after the language had once again faded from military significance. The men who had played such a crucial role in the Allied victory returned to reservations still plagued by poverty and discrimination, carrying their stories in silence for decades. In 1982, nearly 40 years after they had confounded Japanese intelligence with their ghost voices, the surviving Navajo Code Talkers finally received recognition when President Reagan declared August 14th National Navajo Code Talkers Day. Henry Yazzie, by then a 63-year-old grandfather, attended the White House ceremony with mixed emotions. The recognition was welcome, but late. Many code talkers had already passed away, their contributions unacknowledged during their lifetimes. As he accepted his medal, Yazzie thought back to that day on Bougainville when Commander Watanabe had declared, "These codes are unbreakable." The Japanese commander had been correct, though not for the reasons he imagined. The Unbreakable code wasn't a mathematical algorithm or a mechanical encryption device. It was a living language, carried in the minds and hearts of a people who had survived centuries of hardship and attempted cultural erasure. The ultimate irony was not lost on Yazzie. The very language that American authorities had tried to eradicate had proven to be one of America's most powerful weapons. The culture that had been dismissed as primitive had created the most sophisticated military communication system of World War II. And the voices that had been silenced in reservation boarding schools had spoken with decisive authority across the battlefields of the Pacific, helping to secure Allied victory. In the final analysis, the success of the Navajo Code Talkers represented more than just a military achievement. It stood as powerful testimony to the value of cultural diversity, the unexpected applications of indigenous knowledge, and the contributions of Native Americans to a country that had often failed to recognize their humanity. The Japanese military had deployed two of their finest cryptanalysts against the Navajo Code, utilizing the most advanced mathematical techniques and linguistic expertise available. They devoted countless resources to breaking a code that, in the end, was unbreakable, not because of its complexity, but because of its cultural uniqueness, a language unrelated to any other on Earth, spoken by fewer than 50 Zuzu-Zedran people, most living in a remote corner of the American Southwest. The story of the Navajo Code Talkers serves as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful solutions come not from advanced technology or complex systems, but from the rich cultural heritage that makes each human community unique. In the case of the Navajo Marines, that heritage helped save thousands of American lives and contributed significantly to the Allied victory in the Pacific. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.